I look at multiple years of race data. I can give averages and historical data for those final qualifiers and breakdowns of the different splits that made up qualification times and the like.
That Triathlon Show, episode 76. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and on today's episode I talk with Russell Cox on what it takes to qualify for Kona, and where and when it might be easier or harder to do so. We talk about how this varies from age group to age group and between genders, all sorts of statistics really, and we also discuss what's required to win, place high, or be a mid-packer at the big dance itself in Kona in various different age groups. But before that, this episode is sponsored by Precision Hydration. If you haven't already listened to Andy Blow, the founder of the company, on episode 49, you can learn a lot about how important hydration really is and how many ways there are that you can mess it up if you get it wrong. And Andy has tried all those ways to mess it up, that is. After which he got tired of it and learned everything there is to know about hydration and electrolytes and founded Precision Hydration. So to just get a quick individual race hydration strategy done for yourself, go and take their free online sweat test on precisionhydration.com, and I'll have that link in the show notes. And use the discount code ThatTriathlonShow, all one word, all caps, for 15% off if you buy any of their products. Alright, so a quick intro to today's guest, Russell Cox. He is the head coach of the Bristol and District Triathlon Club, and he is a triathlon coach that can be found on his website coachcox.co.uk, which will also link up in the show notes. And he is the producer of some amazing Kona and Kona qualifying statistics that we'll discuss today as our main topic, to learn what it takes to get there and to perform when you are there. So it's a different kind of topic than most topics that we've had so far, but a really interesting one, I think. I really enjoyed learning more about it, and I had no idea about what the specific times that you need in certain age groups were, but I know that many of you are really looking to qualify, and many of you are qualifiers already. You have been to the Kona several times, so this is very relevant for a segment of the audience at least. And even if you are not quite there yet, then hey, if you have a dream, then you need to make it a goal. And the first step of creating a goal is to make it specific, and then you need to know what it takes to get there. So this is getting that dream into a goal and making it specific. So let's dive right in and listen to this episode on Kona statistics with Russell Cox. I'm here with Russell Cox from Bristol, triathlon coach, and a really good guy with the statistics and the data, especially when it comes to Kona qualification and also results at the big dance itself. So Russell, welcome to That Triathlon Show.
Hi there, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really cool. We were just talking about how I somewhat by accident stumbled upon your website, which I hadn't been aware of before. But you got plenty of really nice statistics there about how to qualify and how you can expect to perform if you get there. So we have many listeners of the show that are interested in qualifying. Many have qualified already, but and want to see how they can expect to perform. So let's just start talking about that, and with a broad overview first about how many qualifying slots for Kona are available with the traditional route of qualifying, and how do those break down between bigger and smaller races and regional championships and so on?
Okay, so I mean, total worldwide number of slots varies a little year on year. It's the overall number has gone up most years for kind of the last 6 or 7 years. And so the numbers you see in Kona have equally gone up. Right now, you're looking at basically just over a couple of thousand slots spread out around the world, if I remember correctly. So those are broken down into 80 slots, or certainly for the next year, it will be 80 slots for what are counted as championship races like Frankfurt or South Africa, Texas, the big ones there. And normally it's 40 for other races. And a few.
What things might affect it if it's something different than 40 for the other races? What factors?
There's one or two. I mean, there's no real fixed pattern as such. 40 is your standard for most races, 80 for championships, and then what you'd also have is sometimes newer races will come in with a lower number. So there's one or two next year which have 30 or 25 slots. Ironman Philippines is one example. And then there's a few of the other kind of almost oddities in the sense they're not your standard races for qualification. The two Chinese 70.3 races have 30 slots each as well. So generally it's 40 and 80. And then there are a few exceptional cases which look to be either Ironman trying something out or just, giving a new race a few slots to see how it works out.
And what does that, if we talk about 40 for one race, how many age groups are there in total? So what's that per age group in number of slots?
So it will vary a little bit because obviously at the very high end, the kind of 80 plus or 78 age groups numbers will vary with races, but you're usually looking at least 10 age groups per for men and 10 for women. The distribution is not, equal per age group. It's in relation to the number starting in each age group. So you will see quite a bit of variance depending on your age and gender. Basically, I mean, fundamentally, if you're a woman looking to qualify for Kona, you would typically see one or two slots for your age group available. In championship races where more slots are available, that might go up to 3, 4, or even 5, depending on the number of who've entered in your age group. But generally, you're looking at 1 or 2. So you have to be right there at the very front of your age group to gain a slot. If you're a man, there's more slots on offer because the majority of athletes in Ironman are male. So you'll typically be looking at least 2, and it can vary. I would say maybe 4 or 5 is the top end if you've got 40 slots in the race, and that can go up to 10 or 12 for the biggest age group in the championships. So there's a bit more range for those bigger male age groups, but obviously there's a lot more people in the age group.
Yeah. And you have, I guess this is a good point to mention that on coachcox.co.uk, which we'll link to in the show notes, you have a lot of these different reports, some summary reports, and then race-specific reports on qualification.
Yeah.
What are the most important things that you track in those reports that listeners that are interested in qualifying might find the most useful?
So, I mean, a lot of this idea kind of started out of the fact that when I was racing and trying to qualify for Kona, one of the things you would do is the race you've entered to qualify, you go and look at the past results and you start to try and work out what sort of times people qualifying were doing. So at least you have an idea if it seems realistic to you. I mean, obviously there are lots of other variables involved, but that's kind of fundamentally something that I think any age grouper considering qualification does. And obviously coaching a lot of age groupers now and lots of people interested in this, it's a common question of if I want to go to Kona, what time do I need to do? So probably the kind of the one that people most or can go to quickest of all the stats is the is the final kind of automatic, what I call the final qualifier or automatic qualification time, which is basically the idea that if there are 5 slots in your age group, the 5th place in your age group gives you the time you would need to automatically qualify. So you would know that at that year, if you've been at that time or faster, that would have put you in a place where you qualified. Now, that does vary year on year. So one of the things I do on my site is I look at multiple years of race data. I can give averages and historical data for those final qualifiers and breakdowns of the different splits that made up qualification times and the like. So there's a much more detailed picture. But probably the first thing you would go to is that final qualifier, because if you see a time like just looking at Ironman Florida's data here, as I've put that up today, if you're a 30 to 34-year-old male, you need the final qualifier did a 9:01:47 by my calculations. So you'd know there that in that age group, you're going to need to be right about 9 hours for an Ironman, or specifically for Ironman Florida, if you have a chance of qualifying.
General trends in qualification, are there any patterns that you see now that you've been following it? And are there different trends and patterns in different age groups and genders?
So, I mean, I think it's an area which I look at a little bit. I have certainly in terms of trends over time, whether qualification is changing is one area I look at. Broadly, if you're between the age of 30 and 50, that's when qualification is the most competitive for you. Below 30 years, the younger age groups tend to be, I feel, a little less competitive, or rather there tends to be 1 or 2 particularly good athletes and not so much density, whereas once you get into like the 30s and the 40s, there's a much greater density of athletes with the potential to qualify. So those times get tighter around that qualification. And similarly, as you get older, you obviously start to see declining times overall, with the occasional exceptional outlier. The other thing you probably see is with women, female age groups, you find that particularly because there's only going to be 1 or 2 slots, there's a lot more of a sense where it comes down to individuals on the day. There can be exceptional individuals turn up, and just one of them needs to turn up and they take the slot. Whereas the bigger male age groups, for example, there's a bit of a buffer when you've got 6, 8, or even 10 slots available. It will give you a little bit more breathing room, as it were. Doesn't matter if there's an exceptionally fast athlete taking the first place. If you're a decent athlete with the right sort of level of performance, you still have a good chance. In terms of over time, I think the big change here has actually been, while the number of slots have increased, the number of competitors has been increased generally in Ironman, and the spread of slots over more races has thinned out the number of slots available in each race. So if you go back about a decade, you'd find that your large championships races might have 18 slots, maybe even 20 slots for the biggest age groups. Whereas now it's much lower numbers available. And that means that, again, it's that narrowing of available slots means you've got to be right in there to qualify. So I don't think the top performers in age groups have massively changed in the last 7-8 years. There's not been an ongoing improvement in times. There certainly has been in the past, but rather the number of slots you might be competing for at any given race is smaller than it used to be, and that means the competition's much stiffer in that respect.
Is there also a bigger depth, or is the depth roughly the same as it's been in, let's say, 7 years ago?
I think generally the depth remains much the same. I think one of the bigger trends I feel I'm seeing in the results data as a whole is there it feels like there's a bit more separation now between your front of pack potential qualifiers and top age groupers in each age division, and the kind of middle to back of pack, the people racing in that bigger part of the field. It feels like where we've seen entry numbers go up, that hasn't impacted as much at the front in the sense of making that grow in size. What it seems to have done is filled out that middle to back end of the kind of results distribution and added weight there. So what I tend to see is that the fastest times, the top age groupers perform in similar ranges to what I've seen before, but there looks to be a slight slowing at the kind of overall median time and the like, as we get a bit more weight towards the back.
Right. And what about races, specific races, or even types of races, regional versus small versus traditional? How does the difficulty of qualifying or the race type and race impact on that? And where is it the easiest to qualify?
So the easiest to qualify question is I think the hardest one to answer. And actually, I very deliberately never state a race as the easiest to qualify at on my website, because I know that there would be people who would immediately kind of say, no, it's definitely not, or, there would be a lot of debate around it. I think there are variations between different races. There are certainly ones I would encourage an athlete to pick over others. Generally, I would say timing and location are the big factors that determine how a race might pan out as a qualifier. By that, I mean, if it's an unusual time of the year, very close to Kona can help. Or if the location isn't the most convenient for a lot of people and doesn't draw in the most competitive field, that can help as well. So those are things you might look to. So a common one I recommend for athletes who are kind of close to it is Ironman UK. It's a local race for us. It's in our country, but it generally, I would say it's not the most competitive. I certainly wouldn't describe it as an easy qualifier, but I think it's a different experience to, for example, going to Frankfurt, which has a lot more slots, but attracts a very competitive field. So there are choices like that. But you also have to bear in mind that when you look at this data and you try to work it out, so are lots of other people who are trying to qualify. And I think that can affect it as well. If you spot what you think is an easier qualifier, you can probably be pretty sure that quite a few other people have. So one example would be Ironman South Africa has sometimes been considered a slightly easier choice to qualify at. Again, it's a championship, it gets 80 slots, but it's a mostly local field racing there. But then some years, there's been a big influx of European athletes, American athletes, and it looks like they've come to chase slots, and the slot times came down with that. The qualification times came down that year. So, there it might have appeared that this might be an easier choice because the times looked relatively manageable, but then lots of other people saw it, came there, and suddenly those times come down, or the density at the front of the race increases, and it isn't what you expect. And
I guess that we need to take into account, or we should encourage anybody listening and wanting to get a slot to not just look at what looks like an relatively easier race, but actually, can you perform in that race? If Ironman Malaysia looks like an easy race to perform, but you're terrible in the heat, then it's probably not so easy for you to qualify at that race.
That's definitely that's a good example of if you look at some of those races like Malaysia in hotter and humid climates, they can look a lot less competitive because obviously the times look a lot slower. And to be honest, if you are a fast athlete and you can handle heat and humidity well, they may be a very good choice for you. But for a lot of athletes, it really wouldn't work well at all. And I would say one of the things I see in results the biggest factor in terms of affecting a result set for a race and kind of slowing a race down is always heat. Of all the things I see, if a race has a particularly hot or humid year, you will see that effect immediately in that year's results when you compare them with previous years. So that's a massive one for athletes to consider. If you can't handle heat, be very careful picking a hot race.
Yeah. And you talked about that last automatic qualifying time as being one very useful thing for the listeners. And actually, I didn't send this over in the questions to you, but maybe you have it in front of you anyway, because it was my mistake. I should have. Do you have any examples for a few of the more common age group, like the 30 to 34 male and female, and 45 to 49 male and female, for just one example race about what that final qualifying time has been, just to give the listeners a rough idea? Let's pick Ironman Frankfurt, for example, or whichever race you want to pick, if you can bring up those numbers.
Right. So I just pulled that up off the website. It's easy enough to find. So Frankfurt is a fast race. It's a championship race, and it's always drawn a fast field. So looking at the data, typically in the 30 to 34 age group, you're looking at 8 slots on offer. And if I go to 8th place, which would be my outside automatic qualifying time, the last 2 years, it's been around 9 hours, 1 minute in 8th place at Frankfurt. And if we take an average over 10 years of data, around 9:14 is where you would need to be in 30 to 34, male 30 to 34 to qualify, with 8 slots on offer.
And what about the females?
So for the women, let me find that. So women get 2 slots. Even at a championship race, they won't get many. In actual fact, it's interesting. If you look at generally in Europe, 10 to 15% of a field is made up is women, and the rest is men. So in Europe, in particular, slot numbers for women tend to be quite low. So this year it was a 10:07 to come second in that age group, and the year before it was 9:55. And the average kind of for over a decade of data is 10 hours, 7 minutes for second place.
Right. And what are those numbers for the 45 to 49 age group?
So for 45, 49, so one of the bigger age groups, they would probably have around 12 slots in the male age groups for men. And there we're looking around, this year was 9:39, the previous year was 9:28, and the kind of average is around 9:51. So you start to see,
and the ladies,
and the ladies, there is there it's was 10:25 this year, 10:06 the year before, and average around 10:54. But it's worth saying with that average, where I'm looking at over a decade of data there, the older results are probably pulling that down a little bit. So in recent years, it's probably a bit more like a 10:35, 10:40. If we looked at the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. Seems competitive to me. So people need to do the training.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Frankfurt's an interesting choice. I have recommended people race there and qualify there, and I have had people be successful doing that. You do need to be a very strong, confident athlete of those sort of times to do it, because there will be a lot of competition turning up to get slots at Frankfurt.
Yeah. Finally, you have statistics on the actual Kona results themselves as well. So how about we talk about those times again for a couple of age group, like the 2 age groups we have already talked about, and you have the 2017 results. I believe I looked at them on a blog post. What were the winning and the median and the times required to finish in the top 20 in those age groups, men's and women? So
if you wanted to finish first in the 30 to 34 age group in Kona this year, it was 9:04:38. the median overall, so the whole age group as a whole was 11:01:56.
When you say age group as a whole, you mean that age group?
Yeah, all of that age group. Yeah. And then 20th place in 30 to 34 was 9:27:55. Okay. So 45 to 49, it was a 9:18:43 to win, and a 9:49:53 for 20th place. And the median in that one was 12:04:23.
Yeah. And the ladies?
For the women, winning the 30 to 34 age group was a 10:08:50. And 20th was a 10:47:01. And the median was 10:04:09. I've got let me double check that. That is a miscalculation on that one. I'll have to check the number on that one. There must be something that's thrown that number out. Oh wait, a wrong column. That's what it is. Wrong column. Sorry, 11:01:56. So going back, I've been looking. My table is women first, men second, and so I've got my one table's one way, the other's the other way. So the women's median was 11:01:56 in that age group. The men's medians I gave you were slightly wrong. I'll come back to them.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, my two tables are in different orders. Right.
We'll link to this again for the listeners in the show notes, so you can go and look at your age group and everything. But this is just to give some rough idea about what to expect and
I think the thing I'd say,
some more information about what you can find on Russell's website.
Yeah. So for female 45 to 49, we've got a 10:17:31 to win and 20th at 11:12:17. And getting the right column, it's the number I gave before. The median is 12:04:23. I think, with Kona, it is a very skewed race. It's selected entry, lots of fast athletes making up the bulk of the field. So it shifts medians, it shifts those top times down, basically makes them faster than you'd see it pretty much any other race.
Yeah.
Despite relatively, what is a tough, it's not really a tough course, but a tough conditions in particular to race in. The wind and humidity kind of make that course more challenging.
So let's talk about the splits as well, because you have statistics for them. So maybe just do one age group category. I know you can pick any category that you want for Kona, and the men's and women's swim, bike and run splits. Like if you have, I think you have median splits. Is that what you have, or do you have top splits? Yeah, median I think is good for this.
I can give you both median and a range if you want, but
whatever makes for good listening, you decide.
So what I'll do is I'll do male 40 to 44. That's the biggest age group at pretty much every Ironman race. I don't think there's anywhere it isn't. In actual fact, it's that's the bulk of your Ironman triathlete field, basically. So using this year's numbers, the median swim time for that age group was 1:05:34. And
non-wetsuit, so it's pretty fast.
Non-wetsuit, so that's decent. That is good going. I would imagine that you're looking at sub 1 hour swimmers in a wetsuit at most other Ironmans coming in at that sort of time. The fastest time I've got there is a 48:32, which is interesting. It's one of those ones where probably fine. I'd always, sometimes when those numbers come out, I'll double check the result to make sure there's nothing weird about that particular result, but likely to be, former swimmer of some description. Yeah. The longest was a 1:55:57. And it's worth remembering with the times, particularly the longest, while it's a selective field, obviously some people have a bad day. Plus, people get there via lottery. Well, not lottery now, but a legacy mechanism and the like, which means that not everyone there is necessarily a qualifying athlete or at the same level. Then on the bike, a 5:17:57 is the median bike split. Again, that's, that will be a pretty respectable bike split at most races. Kona obviously occurs under hot conditions and lots of wind. We have a 4:43:43 as the fastest split, and an 8 hour 7-minute 48 as the slowest. So it's quite. There are, you will see the fastest bike splits in some of the age groups are kind of closing in towards pro territory.
And I guess you can often have those cases on the swim and even on the bike and the run of former professional athletes in a single sport coming over and to age group triathlons.
And I remember, I couldn't tell you the race or the particular. I remember I've seen athletes where I assume they were a former cyclist, where I've seen an athlete, I think in Austria, with like a 4:35 bike split or something ridiculously low for an age group, or incredibly fast. But then, the run was almost as long as the bike. So sometimes with that as well, what you see is this exceptional bike followed by, not such a strong runner. But equally, in these competitive age groups, it could well be that that's our age group winner.
All right, so, I guess this gives us, go on if you had something that you were about to say.
If you want, the only other one to add is the run was a 3:59:31. So actually, you can see there the run performance. I would say the median run time shows you people putting a lot more into the bike and not doing so well on the run, really. As I'd say a 5:17 in Kona versus a 3:59. That there's a bit of disparity in those two performances. But the run conditions could be very tough in Kona as well.
Yeah, I think this gives a great overview of what sort of information that you have, and we again encourage anybody interested to go and have a look at that in more detail for their specific age group, because you have all those statistics nicely available on your website. So let's move into some rapid fire questions, starting with, what's your favorite book, blog, or resource related to triathlon?
So I would say at the moment, I use quite a mix of resources now. I tend to, social media has changed a lot of the way you learn or get access to new ideas or information. So, following different things and tracking different sites. If I think back, there are books like Gordo Byrne's Going Long and Joe Frill's Triathlete's Training Bible. Right when I started racing were kind of the books that really acted as Bibles to me. And these days, I perhaps use a mix of sources, and you do different courses and that as you train as a coach, and do CPD as a coach that kind of bring in new ideas there. But I try and use a mix of things nowadays, read different ideas, evaluate whether I think they work, think they might work for me, or for my athletes.
What's your favorite piece of gear or equipment?
So these days I don't really compete much or at all. I mostly coach, but certainly when I was an athlete, the power meter on my bike was probably my favorite piece of equipment. And now as a coach, it's certainly a very useful tool. I have to admit, as a coach, I do like the fact that athletes tend to come with Garmin watches by default now, or at least an equivalent, and it means you can always see if they've done what you've asked them to do. Nowadays, that's probably the big thing. So personally, I love my power meter and training on the bike with those numbers when I was more competitive, and then these days, I guess the GPS watch on my athlete's wrist is the main thing I like for letting me know what they've done.
Yeah. Finally, what's a personal habit that helped you as an athlete achieve success?
So I would say, thinking about this, I think I would say patience. In that, there are lots of different factors that obviously go into it. For me, for taking the example of Kona qualification, it took time to get to that level. And it was about keeping at a process patiently, even when you weren't always getting that immediate result. I think a lot of athletes ask me about Kona qualification, and they come in and they go, the dream is to qualify for Kona. Can I do it in 1 year? Can I do it in 2 years? This sort of thing. And it's a very big question. Generally, you're going to need some time to get there, and you need the patience and willingness to keep working at it, even if you're not necessarily making that breakthrough right when you hope to.
Perfect. That's a great way to end. And you can be found on your website, coachcox.co.uk, and you're on Twitter as well at RussMCox. And we'll have that linked in the show notes. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention before we close this interview?
I don't think so. If people want to come and have a look at my website, that's great. There is lots of stats there. Every so often there'll be new stuff coming up when I come up with a new way to look at data, and I'm always open to questions and ideas around that data. If someone comes up with something that I think will be useful on the site, I will try and incorporate it.
Brilliant. All right, this has been Coach Russell Cox. Thanks for coming on the show, Russell. And thanks a lot for spending all the time and energy you do producing all those reports and statistics, because it's been a lot of work and sweat and some tears maybe even. So it's a great resource for all the age groupers out there. So do go and have a look, and thank you again for that investment of energy and time.
No problem. Thank you.
There you have it. I hope that you found that useful if you are looking to qualify at some point to Kona. And you can find the show notes, including the statistics that we mentioned, on thattriathlonshow.com. But probably even better is to go directly to Russell's website and his posts. We have those on the show notes page linked up, so you can go directly to the relevant posts. And check it out. Look at what the results required in your specific age group are at different races to qualify, and what you need to do to be competitive at the race itself in Kona. So I want to quickly mention a piece of great news. I've been selected for Stride's Power Coaching Group, which simply means that I am a coach that's actively working with athletes using the Stride running power meter and trying to bring this new and exciting field forward. So I tend to use WKO4 for most of the analysis, as that's the most powerful software there is, or tool there is in general for running power analysis. And I've now started to offer running power consultation sessions, either as sort of a Skype session, or I can create reports so that you don't have to be present for the session. And I do this even for athletes outside of those that I coach on a one-to-one basis. So if you use a running power meter and you're interested in getting just a one-off consulting session or a performance report, then you can get in touch with me on michael@scientifictriathlon.com, and that's Michael with a K. And you can learn more about what different things you might get out of that and how it can benefit you and your running and make you improve, because that's always the end goal, to make you faster. It's not about getting pretty charts into your hand. That means nothing without actionable advice and action steps to move you forward towards your goals, which might be Kona if you're listening to this episode. So I think that might be a good investment in that case. Thank you to Precision Hydration for supporting this podcast. Go and take their free online sweat test on precisionhydration.com to get your personalized hydration strategy for your racing and even your training, and use the discount code ThatTriathlonShow, all one word, if you buy any of the products, and that will give you 15% off that purchase. Thank you as always for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.